Now, I don't know who this lady is. I've no idea who this guy is, but the interview took place at CNN, and apparently a couple of sound bites got taken out of context, and it now went viral. It has hundreds of thousands of views as to now. And I want to listen to it and give some Eastern European wisdom on the things that are being said.
No, it's true, but your book has a chapter called The End of White America.
Right.
Which, it's a startling term, and I'm curious what you mean, because...
I love how she's so curious what he means. I think like a 5-year-old can understand what he means. Like, there are experts out there, statisticians, which count the number of people that are born, count the number of people that are dead, also count the number of people that are immigrating, and then they come to the conclusion that by 2040, the ethnical group of people called Caucasians are going to be a minority in America. Now, fine, if you want to have a conversation of whether or not that's a good thing, like that's a different story, but like to not even understand the hypothesis, like curious, what do you mean? I mean, which part of this is your mind unable to grasp? Like, we're not talking about trigonometry, we're not talking about hyper-complex numbers, like a basic big statistic. It's like, yeah, if things are going this way, by 2040, this will happen. I'm curious what you mean. Oh my goodness. I mean, I guess she works for CNN, so that makes sense, right?
Isn't the end of white America, as we see the rise of Hispanics, a good thing? Proof that America is a melting pot, that anybody can succeed here, no matter the color of your skin.
But are they melting, though? Like, this is what he's trying to say in the book. Like, are they melting? Are they adopting the American values? Are they believing in freedom, justice, and liberty for all? Because this is like the conversation that he is trying to spark, and this is where it's all going to go at.
Or your religion, or whatever.
Well, I'm a little concerned when people say, Pat, the majority of people looking like you, that's coming to an end, Pat. So
I hate the expression, like, people looking like you. Like, who the fuck invented that expression? They should get a spanking. People that look like you. It's kind of like trying to weasel your way in order to avoid talking about ethnicity. Like, this is what you want to talk about. It's like, Pat, you're from the Johnson family, right? You contributed a lot to society, you paid a lot of taxes, you made a lot of people on welfare fat. But you didn't have any children, did you, Pat? You didn't have any kids, and now your family tree is going to rot in the dust. After you die, there will be no one to hold your name, Pat. Like, maybe you should start adopting some kids. It's going to be good for the GDP of your household, Pat. But know this, like, when you die, there will be no Johnson left. Like, isn't this like a type of rhetoric that is like just beyond antagonistic? Like, it's almost sociopathic in nature. Like, I'm so glad that the Johnsons aren't going to be here, right? Or like you're looking at a neighborhood and it's like, oh, these Johnsons, oh, in the future, a lot of them have moved out, a lot of them didn't have children, but like a lot of us have moved in. And so it's so great that the neighborhood will have less Johnsons. Isn't that a good thing? Hey, Johnson, aren't you happy that in the future, like, you're going... Like, seriously, what type of person even makes these arguments? Like, do you think if you go to a black person and you say something like that, they would like it? If you have this in reverse, like, actually, people from Mexico are upset about this because, like, there's a lot of Americans from California. They were going into a Mexican town. And they were like rich Californians. They went into this Mexican town. I forgot the name of it. But basically, like, the town became filled with Americans. And the Mexicans were upset that they don't speak Spanish. They're all speaking English. The prices are going up because they have their money from California, right? Like, they're working for the tech bros and they're making a lot of cash. So they're moving to this town. They're driving the prices up. They're pushing the people out of there. They don't have any culture related to, like, the Mexican way of life. They're acting like Californians. And so, like, oh, well, the situation can actually happen in reverse. I see, that's fascinating. And so, do you not think that the Mexicans there have, like, a legitimate right to complain? Like, if you live in a town and all of a sudden prices are going up, all of a sudden you can't get a job because, like, they're the Americans, the Californians, like, they hire each other, they think you're a bigot, they think you're a conservative racist because you don't tolerate them, and they're probably atheists while all the Mexicans there were religious. How do you think that plays out, Like, what is the compassion? Where's the empathy?
So let me say this. What's wrong with this is is the idea that when whites are a minority in this country in 2041 and Hispanics are 150 million, what is going to hold us together when we don't have a common religion, we don't have common beliefs about right and wrong and morality as we used to? We are at war over whether or not equality means equality of rights or equality of rewards.
The American dream, the freedom, the belief, what caused the Arab Spring, that's what holds us together.
You know, the Arab Spring is a really good point. When I grew up, I genuinely bought into the propaganda that every person in the world wants democracy, and that every person in the world wants freedom and justice for all. And I genuinely believe that, right? Because it's true in my country, it's true in the Western sphere, but it's not true everywhere. And you notice this with the Arab Spring, right? Like, you have people in the Middle East that form revolts against their tyrannical oppressors. And you would think it's like, okay, well, they got themselves liberated. That's a good thing, right? But then when they get to vote, do you know what they vote for? They vote for Sharia. Every single fucking time. So, like, you give them democracy and they vote Sharia. And so, like, if you have a group of people that grew up with the values that there is a God, right? Like, there is an entity up in heaven that's all powerful, and that this entity demands certain things of its followers, and that the holy book should actually be made into a constitution. It's not just a religion, but it's like a political thing, right? It's like a political movement that's also a religion. And so, like, those people will always vote for Sharia, even when you bring them freedom. You look at what happened in Afghanistan, right? Like, the Americans came in, and they had, like, a lot of women in the Afghanistani army. And, you know, like, the feminists were like, oh, we finally fought for our rights, we finally got our rights. And when the Americans left, not a single woman fired a bullet towards the enemy. Not a single one. Why? Because they like Sharia. Like, it's not rocket science. They genuinely like Sharia. So, like, in that place, you cannot force people to have your values the same way they can't force their values on you. Like, you would find them tyrannical. And there's even, like, these types of contradictions between Christians. Like, the idea of Matt Walsh, like, 10-hour workday, the only purpose on planet Earth is to toil the land and reproduce. And the only thing you get is a Sunday where you pray for Jesus. Like, that would be hell for most Romanians. Like, we would look at that and find it beyond tyrannical. Right? Like, and our way of life would probably shock a lot of Americans. So, like, there's, like, friction even between, like, different cultures that aren't that far apart, right? Like, there's frictions between the Polish culture and the German culture. Now, the way Americans managed to do it was to create the concept of the Pledge of Allegiance, right? Like, it doesn't matter if you're German, Polish, English, like, you're pledging allegiance to America, you're learning the fucking English language. If you're German, if you're Italian, you're learning English. And it's one nation, undivided under God, right? Now, while Europe had world wars, like, people were butchering each other over here, in America, things were a lot more chill. But, like, you gave up on this concept. You don't expect people to learn English anymore. It's like, oh, they're Spanish. Like, who cares, you know? If they come in and they're practicing, like, a different culture or a different religion, you're not trying to integrate them into your culture to explain why the values are good. I mean, I'm looking, like, at Hollywood. What was, like, that celebrity that was pissing her eyes because Trump is deporting sex traffickers? She got into America. She managed to get a lot of wealth. She managed to get an amazing mansion. And she's living the American dream, but her loyalty seems to be to the people that are part of her ethnicity. When she cries that they're getting deported, right? Like, what am I supposed to drag from this? Like, what conclusions are we supposed to look at? So either, like, the way you manage to assimilate and seduce other cultures isn't working, or you're not even trying it. And so, like, the idea that people just want freedom and justice, that's not true. Like, if you have a gangbanger, right? Like, someone that comes from another place, like, he was born in the gang culture, like, his father was in a gang. Like, there are such people, right? Like, that individual, no, like, he doesn't want justice for all. Like, he wants freedom, right? Like, he wants the freedom to sell drugs. He wants the freedom to swindle on the streets. Like, he wants that freedom. But he's not interested in justice. Like, it really depends on what type of people you're getting from where. And then it's like the morality as well. Like, if you're having Californians that are very pro-LGBT, and they're going to interact with people from the Muslim community, or they're going to interact with people from Mexico, What do you think will happen? Do you think like the Californians will all of a sudden embrace religion and be with the Virgin Mary and understand that homosexuality is a sin? Or do you think that the Catholics are going to be like, oh, actually, you know, these Californians have a point? No, what you're going to get is social friction. Right? Because you don't have a bar of entry. You're not saying like, okay, this is what we do in America. Maybe you like California. Maybe like in America we follow pronouns. If you want to immigrate here, you gotta follow pronouns as well, right? And it would be like a question at the border or something. You don't do that. Why? Because you don't even secure the border. You let everyone in. And once they come in, there's no pressure on them. The only pressure is on the local population to not use the N-word and other slurs and to be anti-racist and shit. But there's like literally no pressure on the people coming in to comply. And so you just create chaos. You just create social friction. You know, like there's other nations that have multiple ethnicities. Like Russia, if I'm not mistaken, has more languages spoken than the United States. China has a lot of ethnicities. But again, like they have a unifying system. Like they're basically saying that this is what being a Chinese is like, this is what being a Russian is like. And then they enforce that on everybody. Meanwhile, in the United States, up until the last decade, you just enforce it on the Caucasians. Like how many times did you see a black person get in trouble for using the N-word? Or how many times did you see a black person getting in trouble for a hate crime? Right? It's like a multiple tier system where like different people are held to different standards. Like for instance, if you make a video game where you have a woman shaking her ass, all of a sudden everyone is outraged. That's sexism, that's misogyny. You have like consultant company, HR hags descend upon the developers and force them to change. But if you have a hip-hop song where someone drops N-bombs and has like a woman that's even like a real woman, not a video game character, a real woman shaking her ass and partially naked and talking about her wet-ass pussy, well, all of a sudden, best song ever, top on the ranking sites. Like, that's not freedom and justice for all, that's segregationism. Different factions following different rules, and you're creating social conflict.
Freedom and the idea of socialist equality and freedom are in mortal conflict. I was in China before you were born with Richard Nixon in 1972. The most equal society you've ever seen. Everybody had a blue Mao jacket on, and they were the poorest people you've ever seen. Now, tyranny, much of the tyranny has been lifted of Maoism, and it's an unequal society in China.
So.
Millionaires and billionaires, as Barack Obama would say, and poor people. But it is freer. Freedom and absolute equality are in conflict.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's the different mindsets as well. The American mindset is that you want people to be free, and it creates inequality. So if you're going to take people from socialist nations, like they're going to try to do socialism. See, the reason that really pisses me off is that no one would debate the concept that if you had a time machine and you would bring like millions of people from Nazi Germany, like actual civilians, right? Like actual citizens, you'd bring them in from Nazi Germany and you'd bring them in the United States today. Unvetted, like you don't know who's actually supporting the Nazi party and who isn't, but they're like, you know, looking for a new life. They don't like the oppression from Germany. They don't like whatever. And you're just bringing them in the United States, unfiltered, without asking them anything. What do you think is going to happen? Well, they're going to try to impose their values on everyone else, right? Like, they're going to go into enclaves, they're going to go into communities where everyone speaks German, because at the time English wasn't an international language, so like most of them wouldn't know English, they will only speak German. And they will form their own communities, their own cities, their own neighborhoods, and then they will try to push their values onto everyone else. And this actually happened in the past. This happened during the Great Depression. You guys took so many Germans in, and they started publishing German newspapers, encouraging workers to rise up. They were pushing Marxism and communism, and most people didn't know because of the language barrier. And so, like, yeah, I don't know who this gentleman is. I don't know what book he wrote, but the CNN reporter is really interesting. It's like, well, what do you mean? Well, just look around and figure it out. I mean, Anna Kasparian did. Let me know what you guys think, and as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.